Hi everyone, Carl Brundage here, Certified Technical Architect and Salesforce MVP. I got a special request on Twitter around advanced work with a waterfall and how you can kind of create your own groupings to look at different values in it. So I'm going to start with something that I've done that's very similar from a waterfall perspective and then how we can adjust it with some SAQL. So in this case, we're going to look at my net operating income variation waterfall chart. And what this does is it walks you through a budget amount to what you actually ended up with. So we go from 135 million down to 115. And what's nice about this is based off of different categories, we can see why something happened. So in this case, rent was 25 million under budget, something like real estate taxes, 6.8 million above budget. Now what's different than the normal waterfall chart is we aren't actually looking at all these different groupings in the same measures. What we're actually doing is looking at an actual value here and then looking at a difference from budget, so actual minus budget in these particular pieces. So let's take a look at the SAQL behind the scenes that's actually powering this visualization. So I'll walk through the different pieces and then look at how we can modify it. The first part is kind of your standard loading up a data set. I have some filters. The filters here aren't particularly interesting. They don't do anything specific for me other than limit to a certain set of properties for a certain time range and a different way. So in this case, looking at just the operating income. You don't need these filters in order to produce this type of waterfall chart. What happens next is I actually split the financials into two different data streams. So the first data stream, I'm going to group by everything. So in the case where we group by everything, we're going to end up with really just one row. So if I were to do something crazy like delete this and run, well, we don't actually have the B stream, but take my word for it that in this case, we would only have one row. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group by the attribute values that I want to show below. So in this case, I just have this display group 1. It corresponds to things like minimum rent, lease termination, bad debt, and so forth. So my two streams, I'm going to operate on them a little bit differently. The first one, the Q stream that has the groupings, I'm going to display the actual groupings. I'm going to use a sort order just to get the data in a certain display. So if you think about looking at a financial statement, sort order will actually put it in that right order. And then here's where I'm going to do some calculations. Rather than taking a column itself, I'm going to take the difference. So what's the difference between the actual amount and the budget? So if you budgeted 25 million, you only made 20 million. Instead of showing either of those values, I want to show the 5 million difference from actuals to budget. Now, what I can do with my B stream, because it only has one row on it, rather than putting in a value for my data set, I'm going to actually put in the word budget. So I have a hard-coded text of budget. I'm going to put in a sort order of 0 so that it shows at the top. And in this case, I'm going to use a different measure. I'm going to use just the sum of the budget amount. The key here, though, is if you've noticed, I've aliased these columns to match my Q stream. So what happens in a little bit is we're going to put these two streams together, and you'll see that the fields will match up. The next thing, I just have a little filter here, so if there wasn't any difference in a particular category, it's less data for somebody to use. Again, this isn't that particularly interesting to the effect that you're trying to get. Where it starts to come together here is the union statement. So it'll take everything in B, everything in Q, and put it together, and then order by the sort order. So if I run this query, we have the results below. You notice that it took B as my budget and put it first. If we were to remove this union statement, what you'd see is, well, budget's not there. It's just going to do the typical waterfall thing. So what this means is you can really inject any type of calculation that you want inside of the blocks of a waterfall chart. The question I was asked specifically was, hey, maybe how do I insert something where I'm subtracting the difference between the final result and the actual result? So what we could do is we could come up and we could add another stream. So let me just add a C stream as an example here. We can call it high, you can call it whatever you want. The key is that we're calling the text that we're putting there as the display group that we want to show. I have a 999 sort order to show it at the end. And in this case, I'm just calculating the sum of budget from the sum of actual. But this case, instead of doing it for a particular group, I'm doing it overall. So if we run this, you'll notice, okay, the sum between budget and actual, where I had 134 million and 115 million. I'll have that down at the bottom. I did forget one key thing. I didn't union in C. So let me just put that there, rerun it. So there we kind of have the overall difference. Nice thing is, if you didn't want this as your last part in the waterfall, you could jump in and say, well, let's put it, instead of 999, let's put it at 515. We'll run that and it'll kind of get inserted in the middle. So by using kind of a statement with a hard-coded value, or you can do a bindings value, you can kind of put any calculation you want as long as you use the same values and then union it all together. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions, send me a message on Twitter, reply to this video. I'll be happy to go through those responses. Happy analytics, everyone.